Good evening. We're excited here with Bold New Democracy and the connections into the Ohio Environmental Council to take a deep look and exploration of the redistricting of the maps, the redrawing of the maps for the Ohio legislature and the Congress districts in Ohio. And this is an opportunity to do this featuring or with the Trent is holding the rudder for us in this journey through this exploration. So thanks, Trent Dougherty. If you'll notice, he's one of our pictures. We don't do this seminar style. We do this conversational style. And so we'll begin this, and people are, will be asking questions and comments and sharing. I like it. It keeps it fresh, keeps it moving, and we get to the areas, I hope, where everyone has an opportunity to ask what she or he really cares about, rather than guessing what those are. So let's begin. Trent, you are the General Counsel for the Ohio Environmental, or you're the General Counsel for the Ohio Environmental Council.
Yeah, two councils spelled differentally. Yeah, that's
I tripped over those two councils.
Yeah,
but the
and thank you, Richard, and also a special thanks to Brewster, who is a member of our board of directors for our action fund, our 501c4. But I'll give you a little brief for those of you who may not know OEC. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan environmental conservation advocacy organization. We started back in 1969 as really an umbrella organization for a lot of the smaller environmental groups that were springing up around the state of Ohio in the late 60s. And for the past 51, almost 52 years, we've been involved in just about every air, land, water, energy, agriculture, and democracy issue that's faced Ohio in those years, playing a sort of niche role, especially at the State House. That's a lot of our focus is at state legislation, state policy, although we do a whole lot of federal work and have through the years a lot of local work, and I've actually ramped the local work up quite a bit, and actually have more than just our 20 key staff in Columbus that work, but also regional staff.
Do you have pardon me, Trent, do you have a presence in Southwest Ohio?
I was just going to get to that. So we have had two Southwest coordinators over the past few years. Our first was Cedric Denson, who is now State Representative Cedric Denson, and Chandra, she's now with the mayor's office.
Oh, Chandra with her last name begins with a Y.
Youngblood.
Yeah.
Yes, Chandra Youngblood. She was our second, and she went off to do bigger and better things. And actually, presently, we are interviewing for our third, our replacement there. So there will be one hopefully very soon here in 2021 to be a regional coordinator or regional manager. That sort of nomenclature just really just depends on their sort of seniority.
When's the deadline for applicants for that, Trent? Do you know?
That's a good question. I think if anyone has any good ideas for folks, feel free to send them our way, and I'll give you I'll do a little shot of some of our contact information towards the end here if you want to send it, or you can look at our website. I think it should still be up. If you look at www.theoec.org and you go to our careers page, you'll see a lot of openings right now, but that Southwest coordinator will be one of them.
Yeah, because we have a lot of people, a lot of young people that have been working hard on the elections for 2020 elections that are organizers and environment. And we know people that work at the heritage farms and, environmental green umbrella. all those kinds of things. We'd love to pass the word out to have people apply if you're still looking.
Yeah, that would be great. And it'd be great to have some candidates for that job. And once we do fill that job, definitely this group will be one of their first meetings to sit down and talk with you all.
Yeah. Well, how did you get an environmental group also to put in I saw the list of clean air, clean water, clean energy, maybe, and the fourth area of focus was democracy. How did your organization jump right into the democracy pot?
Yeah, and it was a sort of a long jump in that we've been involved in a lot of what we characterize in our democracy bucket, a lot of those issues for quite some time. I've been at OEC actually, if you count when I was a legal intern, that started in May of 2004. So I've been on staff for 16 years, and I've been it'll almost be 17 since I was a little legal intern. And through those years, we have helped our partners like League of Women Voters, Common Cause, others on issues that came up. I think this may have even predated me. The Reform Ohio Now issues that came up in the early mid 2000s. We helped with some voter registration issues through the time that I was around, but it really came to pass in about 2017 when we realized it was a common sense realization that a lot of the battles we were fighting when it came to air, land, water, at the State House especially, were issues that really at their core were gerrymandering issues. Mm-hmm. At their core, they were issues where access to the ballot was stopped, and that we needed to find a way to fight just as hard for clean air, clean water, clean energy as we do with our clean and strong democratic institutions. Mm-hmm. And it's you can't have that environment group of priorities mm-hmm. without strong democratic processes, mm-hmm. and vice versa. So it ended up in 2018, OEC along with League of Women Voters and Common Cause were three of the sort of campaign heads for the what then would be primary issue 1 campaign that got the congressional redistricting process together. Actually, we worked in with those two other groups and tons of other groups to get to try to get our version on the ballot, and then worked with the state legislature to get the compromise that we see now before us that was passed. And so that was 2018, and then realized that, okay, we need to actually put in our strategic plan that democracy issues, from redistricting to voting rights to access to the ballots to fair courts, are all environmental issues at heart. And we put them at the same level as air, land, and water.
Yeah, that is great. Are you unusual around the country to put this combination together, or are other environmental groups doing this as well?
For when it comes to sort of independent statewide organizations like us, as you know, Brewster knows, Brewster is on our board of our C4, so more of our political arm. That's connected with the League of Conservation Voters. So a lot of those national groups, environmental groups like League of Conservation Voters, have been putting these together for a number of years. Yeah. And Sierra Club, I think, along the same path as OEC, has been involved for a number of years, but now, really since 2017, for reasons we all know, decided we need to really mesh those together, because it's such common sense. And the issues of environment and social justice, environment and democracy, environment, and public health. All of these issues are so connected. And for too long, we have been in our little silos.
Yeah.
And maybe one of the silver linings of what's happened since 2017, and unfortunately, perhaps what happened yesterday, will only hopefully break those silos apart.
Yeah.
So that we're more connected.
That's exciting. Who has a question or a comment for Trent to make this conversational? We'll keep pausing. Yes, Susan, I notice your hand.
Yes, Trent, Susan Nemi here. I have a question about what role you think and the league and some others can play in the process for the redistricting that's going to happen this year.
That is an excellent question. And those efforts actually have already started, and actually started in early 2020, where, again, not just the sort of three groups that I talked about, but also I think we're up to 20 some groups that have been sort of coalescing about how do we take what the groups have accomplished in 2015 to get the state legislative map process changed, and in 2018 getting the congressional map process changed, and how to make it a reality, especially when it comes to the public involvement process. So we've been meeting for a little while over 2020, and we're going to be meeting more in 2021 to set up a framework to or I guess what we call like a roadmap for what the redistricting process should look like when it comes to really what a fair map is first. We need to define what fairness means, because everybody loves that value of fairness, but what does it mean? And what does it mean to people? And that's going to be the first thing that we do is to go out and educate our individual group members, but the public at large also, on why is it important to have fair maps? What is the fairness that we are looking for? Is it just that there's more D's than office than there were before? That's not necessarily a win. That doesn't necessarily say fairness. It's keeping communities together. But why? Why is it that, and I don't have my map really in front of me to know exactly how ripped apart Southwest Ohio is, but I always love to bring up Summit County near Akron, which is divided congressionally into three, in some maps earlier, 4 different districts for one county. And a county that's not as big as the county I live in Franklin County, where we have essentially 2 with a little piece of a third. Why is it important to have communities together? And that's an education piece that's really been missing for a long time. And that's the first thing we're going to do, and do it in a way where environmental groups talk to our members and say why it's important for the environment, why reproductive rights groups explain why it's good for reproductive rights, why social justice groups talk that, but also have a coordinated education pieces as well. So we're working on that right now. And shortly thereafter, there is going to be a public process at the legislature. And right now, the Senate president, the new Senate president, has said, mainly because the census data has been so late, that public process won't happen until summer, midsummer. But we hope to get people really engaged in it much earlier than that.
Can we work in? How can we help you? Can we work in partnership with you? We know about the midsummer public process, Trent, and we certainly were going to be prepared to be full players in that. But are there any ways in these early months of 2021 that we can support you or help you or learn from you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one big thing is, which I'll give you some of information also, keep in contact with OEC. I think I mentioned to you, Richard, when we had a phone call earlier, I actually had a call with some of our donors earlier today and talked about, some of our plan of keeping folks engaged, whether it's sort of a combination of phone calls, things like this, or email blasts out, newsletters, things like that, to keep everybody just engaged, but also educated as to where all these processes are and what the next steps are, both at the official level, but also at the level that the coalitions are working in. So that's sort of the main thing, is to really, follow us on all the socials. If you're into that, sign up for emails. Keep inviting me to come chat. I love to chat, and I also heard, I will leave the details to all the processes, since I hear that Mia Lewis from Common Cause and Katie Shanahan, both good friends and partners of mine in OEC, are going to be chatting with you all pretty soon.
Yeah, February 4th. We're going to follow up with your call.
Yeah,
with them.
Yeah, so they'll have all of the huge details, and we'll be those deep details. We'll be working with them, but I think I leave that to them in terms of getting into the details there. But when it comes to really just keeping yourself engaged and educated, and we can help you do that, and sort of vice versa, from Columbus down and from Southwest up. That's good. I see somebody's got another.
Thank you. Who has the next? I'd like to switch to somebody else, if you don't mind, Susan.
Well, that wasn't, I didn't make my question clear. I wanted to know how the coalition and the group was going to affect the public process and the commission itself directly.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So we are, well, in the first place, we are working on getting the legislation. So there's going to be legislation needed to create the public process. And we are working in the coalition. The coalition is going to be working at the State House to form that piece of legislation, help form that piece of legislation, advocate for that piece of legislation that creates an actual, what we consider a very robust public process that isn't just what I think worst case scenario is there's a hearing sometime in August before the September maps are due. What we are pushing at that level at the State House is ultimately we would like to see a hearing in each congressional district, an actual, at the very least, an actual hearing like that. And we're also working, the coalition is working to put together our own map making tools. So we'll have to wait until we get some of those census data back, but having those map making tools and having them accessible to folks, where I think some of the dream is that, you're sitting in your your doctor's office waiting room, and you can easily just get on a computer and type and create your own little map there while you wait, or in other opportunities where you are able to engage in that, where we have meetups, maybe virtual, maybe actual face-to-face, where we can work on maps together, because that's the important thing here that is different than in the past, is that the public will be encouraged, and actually there is a mandate to actually have an opportunity for the public to create their own maps. So it starts with the legislature now, and also, and I know I know Richard's getting the hook and wants to hook me and stop me from talking. I know I'm treading on on David Pepper time, but
you're doing great.
But the one thing is also, while redistricting is the most important thing that the General Assembly is going to do this year, a close second is the biennial budget, and part of that budget needs to have enough funding to fund the map making, fund the committees, fund the public process. And that's going to start in February. And that's a place where you can engage with your Southwest area legislators to say, we need fair maps, and we need money to help make sure that those maps are fair.
Yeah, we're learning how to lobby our reps and our senator from down here. Of course, they're all Republican down here. or the senator. Well, no, they're not. They just don't have much power in the state house. But we're learning to do that. Christine, you have something to share or ask.
I do. Thank you, Richard. I have a few questions. You said we have, by the public meetings, we're able to contribute to the mapping. Who is going to be over the mapping? Are they hiring somebody in? Do the judges then vote on it? When you said that your last comment about funding, and Richard's right, the Republicans are love Warren County being district in Hamilton County. That's how we lose every 2 years. That's to Shabbat. So how now fair mapping if it has to go to get money's needed? What is this money that's needed? We voted on it. We said we want it done, and now we have to raise money to get it. Make sense?
So to that question, what I'm saying is that to ensure that there is a robust public process, so that there's public hearings around, so that there are so that there's enough opportunities for the public to be involved, the state cannot have the legislature cannot have the excuse that, well, we can't, we haven't budgeted for having different hearings around the state on this issue. Why don't we just have one hearing to present, the maps we want one time down in Columbus? We don't want to have that. So there is a fund that the state has set aside. It's I think it's a small amount, but they say it's enough. But the key is to advocate sort of early and often that the public has to be involved in this process. So I remember in a different life of mine, when I was in college, I worked for the Ohio Secretary of State's office, and shortly after college, between college and law school, that in the year 2000. So during that map making, there was really one real public map that was presented, and and continues to be traditionally put by the NAACP. They would draw their own maps, but that would be the only other map that would be presented. And the importance of the public maps is to show evidence that there are, again, understanding what we understand by the definition of what's fair. I think that's a process we're still working with. There is what is in the law that says you can't break up communities, things like that. But these are how you can draw fair maps and why things are fair. And then the public explaining why those are fair. I always say, I think this is true, and I think this is really shown out in the 2020 election. People don't necessarily want to vote for politicians. They want to vote for what's right for their community. That's why you see a lot of places where, certain politicians will win, you think, that are, let's say, we would think are anti-environment. But in that same area, they pass levies for creation of parks, or they pass levies for increased in renewable energy and energy efficiency for their communities. And that just proves that when communities stick together and are able to vote for their community, they'll get an actual true representative. And that's really what the core of that public process is. Where and how, whether they, the powers that be take that, I can't promise you that they're going to say, yo, Christine, your map is perfect, let's do it. But what it also does, and another piece of what we do, and part of why I'm so excited about the strength of the coalition, is that and I'm a lawyer, so maybe I want to see this happen, but things are going to go to the courts. And when you have the public be part of the process, provide their own defensible, and the way that again, a lot of this also goes to some of the technical side of people that are putting together the map, public map making software and stuff. That I went into law because I don't really understand computers. So I'll leave that to them. But it's be in a way that they'll be defensible when you're able to show the public. So it's not just keeping the public engaged, although that's important. It'll also be defensible to provide for when those legal challenges have to come up, and they probably will.
Sure. Yes. Who? Marie.
So it may be a naive question of me since I didn't grow up in this country, but what do you mean by community? You say it's important that the community stays together, but how do you define a community, especially around us where neighborhood is just a continuum, right? You go from street to street. And so is it defined by townships? Is it defined by schools, district? How do you define community?
That's an excellent question, because I think that gets to the heart of having those different sort of public maps being presented, because that definition of community is different in a lot of places. So in the law that we were able to get passed in 2018, which is the congressional side, which is similar to the one that was in 2015 that was passed, there are parameters in terms of you can't split up counties more than once, or there's a methodology. You can't unnecessarily break up certain cities and townships. So there's that definition, but there's also a more personal definition that I think needs to be expressed and needs to be part of the educational process before we get to map making, which is why is it important that you and your definition of what you feel is your community should pick your representative and not the other way around, that your representative gets to pick you. And I think, from a pure environmental perspective, in fact, there was a former state reps, then turned and now former Ohio Department of Natural Resources director, that always said he'd like to see the maps drawn in watersheds, so that your stream and your river is represented by your neighbor. And that's one way of community. As a card-carrying environmentalist, I love that idea, and I think that having it based on where people get their water, I would love to have those be the maps, the way the maps are drawn. But really, it's an excellent question about presenting why you think, what is your community? What do you vote for? Because neighborhoods, it's all, Columbus, same thing as Cincinnati, same thing as Toledo. It just grows and grows, and that's part of the mix. But I think also part of the mix is there's a lot of folks that know your neighbors, you care about your neighbors, you care about each other. You want to have somebody that cares about you that's at the State House or at the Capitol. So that's a long-winded way of saying there are parameters that get to the actual political subdivision boundaries, but the key for the public aspect is to make sure that the voices are heard that are saying, my community is X, and X needs to be represented.
Yes, there is in our neighborhood here in Cincinnati, Trent, in College Hill. The line between District 1 and 2 goes right through our small neighborhood, kind of in the middle of the Hamilton County. And there is one house, she's an activist, leader of the College Hill Democratic group, whose house is divided. In other words, like 4 of her rooms are in District 1 and 4 of her rooms are in District 2. So an extreme example of that. Julie, and then Paul after that. Yeah. You have to unmute, Julie. Yeah.
Well, my question is pretty simple. It goes along the line of what Marie was asking. It's been my impression that people, in desiring to undo the extreme gerrymandered nature of Ohio, it's absurd. And that in wanting to undo that have gone in 2 directions. One, to say, why not just draw straight lines vertically and horizontally and create the districts that way? Then nobody can complain that anybody is being unfairly excluded from representation. And on the other hand, my question is, why isn't it just county by county? So that's kind of an informational question.
Yeah, that's so to the last part, again, this predates me and may predate everybody that's on this call, but the state legislature used to have representation by county. And I think you can imagine what that looked like. When you've got Hamilton County, I heard somebody is in Adams County.
Yeah.
Those two having the same, much different population, but the same number of representatives. So that was like the old way of looking at it. And obviously that had some problems as we as a state grew in some places and shrunk in a lot of places. So it made things difficult at that state level, and especially at the congressional level, because we're looking at 700,000 people per district. Dividing the state into nice even squares of 700,000 is difficult. I agree with you that I think that would be, I would love to see that map and really what that looks like and what that would translate to be. Again, I think that part of that public process, just to continue to educate folks as to here's this option and let's debate this option.
Yeah.
Let's not have no debate over what happened in 2010 when it was 5 people who locked themselves in a hotel room in downtown Columbus for a week.
Right.
That didn't help anybody.
Right.
So I think you're right as to what can we do in terms of showing here are the options, and have someone tell you, me, all of us, why this option is incorrect and why this option is better.
Yeah, good.
Thank
Paul and then Sue.
Hey, Trent. I'm also a lawyer, and I also think this is destined for litigation in the Supreme Court of Ohio. But, you know, your organization and your coalition are asking people to engage in the public process. And so I think, you know, we're all entitled to some transparency about what the goals of that are. I was involved in vetting issue 1 and investigated through the people who did the modeling for the Democratic caucus, and found out that the best case scenario for issue 1, if the Democrats won 2 out of the 3 constitutional offices, was 6 out of 15. Everybody knows Ohio is currently 12-4, that we're losing a seat. And so I was told the best case scenario was that the Democrats would have 6 and the Republicans would have 9 if issue 1 passed, and if the Democrats then in the fall of 2018 won 2 out of those 3 constitutional offices. As we all know, Democrats lost all 3 of them. And I've never heard an update from your organization or your coalition as to the modeling. So, you know, in terms of what you're asking people to get engaged in, what's the best case scenario, a number, and what's the worst case scenario out of 15 for Democratic seats?
Well, that's a good question. Again, I will lean back on the modeling is not where I live, but I think you know, it's not a 50-50 split, or I guess it can't be 50-50 when we got 15. But you know, I think that's a question to ask. I think it's difficult to, you know, looking at it in any way. If you want to keep things compact, that certain areas of the state you're going to have viable Ds just because of the population in the districts. I mean, Western Ohio, I don't know how that's anywhere there. You can slice and get a blue district. We've all seen what's happened in the past few years to what used to be the Democratic stronghold, where there used to be things called coal country Democrats. That's, you know, maybe the actions of yesterday change things, but maybe not. That those folks continue to be Republican in that eastern part, and I think it's difficult to do that. And just that's my way of saying I'm not sure in terms of the modeling. I think that's a good question to ask, and I can follow up and find my folks. Maybe you can just as easily with the folks to get that where that number is. And then there's also the number of whether, you know, you'll hear a lot of this from when Mia and Katie talk to you about the detailed process of this, but you know, there could be only a 4-year map because we don't have a majority of the commission voting to approve the maps. The process says if you don't have, the minority have at least a couple of votes for that, it only becomes a 4-year map as compared to a 10-year map. What are we going to do with that? And how does that work? With, you know, you're getting only a 4-year map and you're gonna have to redraw maps shortly thereafter. So there's a lot of questions as to what it does, what it will equal. And, you know, I think there's keeping my 501c3 nonpartisan hat on. Ultimately, we want to see fairness there. And sometimes, and I've sort of tried to explain this again, I brought up, you know, Western Ohio. Fairness would be, again, as an environmental advocate, somebody, no matter their you know, R or D against, maybe it's an R against an R, but one of them at least to have an environmental ethic and expounds that in that area and to represent their community in that way. Maybe that's a pipe dream when it comes to some of these districts that we'll be able to get. But yeah, and again, to your point, the fact that we will be losing one makes this even harder, and perhaps even puts that that partisan split even more in continuing with the balance, maybe not status quo, but continue with a strong our advantage because of that. So I would love to hear what let's say if there was the numbers, the numbers you just said in terms of the partisan split, what other than what we have in terms of issue 1 would get us there? Would get us to something better.
A different process, yeah, something to consider.
I haven't figured that out.
Well,
right.
The only thing I can tell you, Trent, is your organization deliberately eschewed the independent commission model, which in Arizona has produced a 5-4 split. So the fact that Ohio isn't going to come anywhere close to that, and we could end up with losing one of our Democratic representatives and have a 3-12 split.
Whoa.
I think people need to be told transparently what the modeling shows. And I respect that you don't know it, but somebody in your coalition does know the modeling. And I think people ought to be told what it is.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you could, Trent, please, as Paul suggested, please ask within the OEC who might be the modeling expert that we could follow up with a conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Sue has a question or comment.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is following up on what you said about we could have a 4-year map. How could that happen?
can see where you're going. Yeah, so under the process that is in the Constitution, I don't have it right in front of me right now, but so if what it requires is to have a 10-year map, you need to have 2 members of the minority party vote for the map. So when you have that, you will get your 10-year map. If you do not have just for shorthand, a bipartisan approved map, when it gets to the last phase, and again, I'm going to leave the core details to Mia and Katie when you talk with them next month. But when you get to that phase, if you don't have a bipartisan approved map, which is a huge possibility, a lot of it just sort of explained there by Paul, it will only be a 4-year map, and you need to go. The General Assembly will go back to that process after that 4 years to create a new map to finish out the 10 years. So that is a potential or presumed sort of safeguard so that you don't have a 10-year horrible map. You have a 4-year horrible map. It's not the best fail safe, but it is it's the fail safe that's in the law right now if there isn't a bipartisan approved map.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I'll come back to your second one, Sue. I'm putting on kind of a parking lot because I'd like to get as many people as possible to have a chance to question and make comments. Who's next to ask a question or make a comment? Yes, David.
Yeah, so, and you talked a little bit about this, but the way the new law works, if I understand correctly, it favors the GOP if the process breaks down. I basically don't I mean,
say it, David.
Yeah, I have no reason to trust that they will negotiate sincerely in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. Are there any media efforts in mind to put pressure on, to get out what these folks are doing, to drive them to, the table?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be part of the process. And I would encourage you all perhaps for a future call on this to talk with Michael McGovern from Progress Ohio. He is one of the folks that are leading the part of the coalition that's focusing on media and outreach and communications to really put on the pressure and accountability to make sure that we don't fall back into what we had in 2010, where it was just in a bunker. And it starts, and again, I think it starts now. It starts with folks getting, in every way, shape, or form, the old traditional, getting into local your local papers through op-eds, LTEs,
Sure.
to social, whatever social you follow or engage in, to make sure that this is not just something that they leave to the summer, that this is something that the public knows is coming and knows that there needs to be fairness put into it and community put into it. And I think that starts with working your community papers, working your local networks to engage and keep folks accountable that way. And there's also like I said, there's efforts, the coalition that deals with communication research, led by Michael, has been working on plans on that side of things since before the election. So
Thank you. We will follow up and contact Michael. Brewster.
Trent, are there any legislators in Southwest Ohio, especially in Hamilton County, who you see as playing an important role on the Democratic or Republican side with this process?
that is a good question. I'm gonna have to bring my map out on that one.
I mean, is Bill Seitz going to play a role, for example?
I was just going to say, it sometimes hurts me to say his name, but yes, Bill Seitz, because he remains in leadership. He will have a huge role to play in that. I think really for you all, I think really giving the Democratic House members the space and the education and the sort of power. So I don't use that word. The power to forcefully get into this process and not leave it up to others to guide. And I think Southwest Ohio has a very important place here and should step up. And I think some of the Democrats down there, I mentioned him because I think he's great and he used to be part of our staff. But Cedric, for one, just helping folks like that sort of have the space and opportunity to talk about redistricting and why it's important and what fairness is and why it's there. I think that's good. But when it comes to your point, as in this area, who's going to have a lot of sway? It's Bill. Bill's going to have a lot. He is, one of the, if not, the dean, he will be the dean or considered the dean of the House. One of the oldest members there. And people look to him as, especially in his caucus, as the one who picked the subject. He'll know it because he'll tell you that he knows it.
Yeah. Does he have any, as far as you know, Trent, does Bill Seitz have any interests, or why would anything that would motivate him to actually move towards fairness and community? Does he have any inclination at all that you know of? Brewster is not excited, doesn't know of any.
This is where I now recall that you're recording this. So
well, you can skip that. That's all right.
I'll skip that. He's. I would not be. You had another member down there that I know that my organization rarely, if ever, saw eye to eye with, and that's Bill Coley. But I'll tell you, I liked going in front of Bill Coley and in Senate committees. It was fun, and I know that he would not agree with me, but he would listen to me. So I would approach things as they may not listen to you, but they're going to sit and they're going to hear you out. And I think Rep. Seitz at the very least will sit for a chat.
Okay, that might be a good start. And we've got to learn ourselves how to make contact with those that are, in addition to the Democrats, those that hold the real power like Seitz does. Who would like to share a question or comment next?
You want to get back to me?
Not quite yet. Thank you. Thank you for being patient. My goal, see, as an organizer, is to have every person here have some airtime or a question or a comment made. So I've got you in the parking lot, dear Sue. So I apologize for being curt. But who would like, that hasn't had a chance yet, to ask a question or make a comment? Sue.
Okay, well, it's been my experience recently watching the State House with the fair funding issue, that they don't negotiate in good faith. They spent months, actually a couple of years, pretending to negotiate public education fair funding, and it went nowhere. So it's a very disturbing example of how the supermajority is just not willing to budge on anything. And I'm wanting to know, what do we look for? How do we watch them? They're going to try to wreak havoc on this, guaranteed. So what do we watch for? How do we stay abreast of what's going on?
Good question.
And
good question.
very,
Good. Thank you.
Important.
Yeah, it's very important. Yeah. What do we watch
Where
for?
things stand, not just, making a phone call here and there, but trying to stay on top of it, regularly, getting
Yeah.
report.
Good question. Yes. What do you think, Trent?
Well, I think, a couple of things. I think, and I'm sure you all already do this, but, making it clear to especially your House members, but, because I know how a lot of the House members will have sort of these town halls, but making sure that, they know you and they know you in your community, in your district, and having those face-to-face opportunities, again, in quotes, face-to-faces like this for the time being, but making sure that you have that relationship, you make a relationship, whether it's good or not so good with your state rep is important. Secondly, as I said, whether there are just the fact that there's an environmental organization that is deeply engaged in democracy issues. Every organization that I can think of, every progressive organization is going to be focusing on this, and so making sure that you continue to follow, whether it's OEC, whether it's pick any other of the organizations that not just play in Columbus, but also that are a lot of the more regional groups and local groups are being actively engaged and are being part of this coalition, which good or bad, we had a coalition in 2018. That coalition is much larger and includes national, state, and local groups, continuing to sort of stay abreast with us here, because there are 4 ways to win this, and I think we've talked about 3 of them, but we haven't talked about the 4th. So the first is the public engagement on this process. The second is winning at the legislature. The third is winning in the courts. Those 3 you can have. I think to your point, Sue, that if you're not dealing with fair dealers, you're not going to win in those 3. And it's going to leave us to the 4th one. And that's what was started before, which was going to the ballot, actually saying your process, you have not followed the process that was laid out. You have not followed any fair process. We are going to go to the ballot with the actual process. And that is an option that is not left us, that we can go to the ballot again. And
at the 4-year point, Trent, or the 10-year point?
No, for a completely different process, for a process that's truly fair.
Would that be done? Could we do that at the 4-year if it's only done for 4 years?
Right. I mean, those we're and I use the royal we, but there's we are looking at what are all the I guess timing mechanisms for going to the ballot.
Yeah.
When it's like, okay, when we say we're going to pack up our things and leave this process and try to fix it. I think there are different opportunities, and maybe it is even after that 4, that's like, no, we need to not have this next round after this 4-year map be a process, then you go to the ballot. I think there are different opportunities there. So I just want to make that clear that there is that 4th part of it. And it does go to your point, Sue, that Yeah, I mean, we saw what there was in 2000 with this process, which it was bad, but it certainly wasn't as bad as then what we got in 2010. And what will we get in with the 2020 census? We will see. But it's to know that as long as we have access to the ballot, and that's another thing we need to protect here. And we talk about democracy more than just redistricting. It's making sure that citizens continue to have access to referendum, to come together and get rid of the laws that they do pass, because Sue, they do pass laws that a majority of Ohioans, a vast majority of Ohioans don't approve of, but can stop you in terms of referendums. I can talk, we do not have enough time for me to talk about HB 6 and everything that was around that bill that we try to get a referendum on. But access to the ballot there, or access to the ballot of actually putting together our own laws, putting together our own constitutional amendments and putting them on the ballot and trying to protect them. So that's another piece, just to know that it's very expensive. It's very time consuming. It hurts good, it hurts bad. But it's something that we need to keep in our arsenal in terms of working on this, is that when in doubt, we go back to the ballot. And ultimately, so your question is, how do you what kind of surveillance on your representative should you have? Going back to that question, is just making sure that there is some sort of relationship. Even if it's not one-on-one, whether it's having organizations like yours bring in state reps, bring in caucus staff, and have a chat.
Yeah.
Because that's what either bolsters those reps to do what's right, or makes them think maybe twice about doing what's wrong.
Yeah, we Pinky, and then Jean, and then Ann. Pinky
Hi.
is the leader of the League of Women Voters here in Southwest.
Co-president. I two questions beyond the partners that you said you worked with, the League of Women Voters of Ohio, I presume it was, and Common Cause. What are the other members of your coalition, and when will we see an actual plan? Like an action plan, so that we can plug in. I mean, I think you're throwing out a lot of ideas, but clearly you must be working on a strategy.
Yes. So there are, I don't know. We were trying to count up all the groups that are on the different calls. The groups like Ohio Organizing Collaborative, Ohio Women's Alliance, Planned Parenthood.
Maybe you could just put it in the chat or something, or put it in the notes or something.
I will, because I don't know if you were on before, but I was mentioning that I actually had a call with some of our donors at OEC earlier today, and they asked that same question, and I had a list in front of me that I don't think was complete, but I'll put that together. And like I may have mentioned to Richard, I'll send a few more things, maybe by the end of the week, but maybe next week, with some resources. But especially if you are going to be talking with Mia and Katie Shanahan next month, we should be. So the coalition, we meet. I think we're meeting every 2 weeks. I think starting in the new year. I think our first meeting is next week, and so the plan should be coming in. And I think I mentioned it's a little bit different than kind of what the coalition was in 2018. We've got national partners, we've got local groups. I know, this is, I'll be talking Cleveland, not Cincinnati, but we had local organization like Cleveland Votes, who has just done quite a bit at the local level to really get voter registration and protecting voter rights, and they're jumping into redistricting. So there's going to be local groups involved too, and again, hopefully in the next month or so, There'll be more in terms of action plans for individuals and groups like yours to be engaged.
Can Bold New Democracy and there are other groups here besides the sponsor here, can we come to the coalition meetings that are every 2 weeks or send I presume they're by Zoom, and can we go to those, or can we join the coalition as an organization?
Richard, I would suggest you send that question to Mia.
Okay.
Because that's a good question for her. So Common Cause, Ohio Voice, those groups and Katie Shanahan's group on the line are probably if there is a titular head, they're the titular head of this sort of long and wide coalition. So yes, we are active. Ask her, send her an email and see, because it's that coalition is big and would love to get bigger. I think it's always wanting to grow. We're very active. Our organization is very active with the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition. So right, it's a lot of the same. It's a lot of the same folks that are there. Yeah, Jean had something to share or ask.
Oh, I had a question. When you had indicated number 4, going to the ballot, would that require the whole collecting signatures on petitions again?
Yep, yeah. That's why I said it's long and expensive, but it needs to be and should be in the back of every group's mind as a way to get things moving.
Let me ask you this. Did legislation pass to shorten the time to collect signatures on an initiative like that?
No, we beat it. Or at least we beat it into inertia, which, because I testified against that bill. That was at the end of the previous
way to go
General Assembly, because that was, they were fighting hard to make it doing two things: making it shorter time frame and increasing the numbers you would need to get. That one thing that I've learned about the State House is they will always go for laziness if they can. If you make it hard enough for them, they'll just stop what they're doing. Doesn't mean they won't pick it back up. Probably will be something that they pick back up. But you see it. I keep talking about HB6, like everybody knows as much about all the process like I do, and really what I mean by HB6. So I apologize for sort of just throwing that number out.
Many of us know a lot about it, but we won't go into that right now.
Yeah, yes. but just saying that the fact that that bill should have been on its way to just being repealed, but December laziness and just inertia stopped it. Something that even folks that voted for the bill said no, we want to at least get rid of it and start new. So they are willing to stop what they're doing. So sometimes it's for good, sometimes it's for bad, and that's at least a good thing that happened, was to stop them from changing access to the ballot. But that is something to definitely keep your eyes on, and especially for a group like this, because that is the core of democracy, is the ability for the people to say, legislature, you failed us. We're going to go and create the law ourselves.
Yeah,
that's something that we've had for almost 100 years, since 1920 or something like that, and we need to keep it.
Yeah, it's good. Ann Isaacs. And you'll have to unmute, Ann.
Unmute.
Okay, so there's a whole nother process for redistricting at the state level. And it involves a panel, right? Versus the state legislature itself. So is there a chance that we can impact the fairness at the state level, which would make everything at the state level better, including the redistricting of the congressional districts?
They are separate and they are different. Whether one can, the actual process, it wouldn't lead that way just magically or by legally that way. But I think it goes back to the same tried and true tactics, and maybe to your point, to focus on that, because there is that separate process, that commission process, that when you do your tried and true tactics of advocacy, of accountability, to that route, that it's going to have the same effect on keeping folks honest on both sides, because you're going to have, if not legislators, you're going to have people that are appointed by the leadership of the legislature to that commission. So you can have those same results if you apply the right pressure. And so, I mean, anybody who's part of that process, I mean, the same folks are really going to have their hands in it in both processes, because it's both, ultimately it's leadership in both of the, House and Senate that are going to have a lot of power, even if it's from either commission or whether it's the General Assembly voting itself. It's the same kind of pressure and accountability.
Yeah, thank you. David Benz, would you do me a favor and scan the chat for me and see if there's any comments to bring into our conversation before we end? If you don't mind, David. Who is next with a question or a comment with Trent? We have about almost 20 minutes left. Who's next? Yes, let me come back, Susan, to you, Dirk.
Yeah, has there been any thought of enlarging the districts and having proportional representation? I feel that might be more fair, like ranked voting, and you'd have the districts that would have, that are evenly split, that could have both a Republican and a Democrat, or if it's, a very large majority of maybe both of one. I know it's a long-term type thing.
That has been kicked around in a lot of places. Rank, you talk about, I think you're rank choice voting, things like that. That's been something that in our world, yeah, we're talking about it. The powers that be talking about that. I don't know.
We used to have it.
I would love that world, but
we used to have it in Cincinnati, Trent.
It should be more fair, and if that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and a feeling of engagement. Yeah. Thanks, Dirk. Sue, Nami.
Nope. Oh, yes, yes.
You have to unmute.
I said, I'm Susan. Sue Magnan is Sue.
Oh, yes, Susan.
That's all right.
Sorry.
This is sort of an environmental question, but it sort of overlaps about the whole Ohio River Valley. And how do you see the different states that share that river? Since we disbanded that one that's been around forever, about how we can work together with the other states. Because I'm worried about all of these fracking and plastic plants that they're proposing, and particularly the one in Pennsylvania that's almost done. But I think West Virginia, Ohio all had some. So if you could just speak to that, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I believe it's been filed. Hopefully it'll be filed, if not very soon. There's what's called a petition for rulemaking to the US EPA that was filed. And that's just fancy term of of sort of like a citizen petition for rules to be made. And what the rule does was essentially to create nutrient pollution criteria for the Ohio River. And a lot like what they did in Chesapeake Bay, a lot like what is been contemplated about in the Great Lakes. And it was put together by a coalition of organizations, separate coalition than what we've been talking about, but led by a lot of the state Sierra Club chapters. We signed on for Ohio, a lot of other organizations throughout the entire watershed of the Ohio River, from Illinois to Kentucky, Pennsylvania, forget all that Hoosier Environmental Network on there. And so what you're seeing is a rejuvenation of groups like that, focusing on the Ohio River. That's focused on nutrients. So a lot of that is, human and animal waste, especially. So it's not just what you hear about up in Lake Erie making things green. It happens in the Ohio River, and you all know where a lot of folks get their drinking water on both sides of that river, all up and down. We've also had a coalition put together in terms of working as coalition, but also with a caucus of federal legislators on both parties to focus on PFAS and PFOA. So those forever chemicals, those Teflons, those chemicals that are meant to keep water off of pretty much any surface. That's in everybody's blood now. That's is now in everybody's, or continues to be in everybody's water. Having a focus there. So there is a lot of attention that is continuing there, even though I think you were talking or referring to Orsanco, which is still a thing, which there's still both a public and a private entity focus on the river by those states. But it's just, it is such a different, because you have a different makeup of states there as compared to the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes have been able to come together, the states, in a way, both public and private entities together that you don't see, because you've got the Ohios, the Pennsylvanias, and the West Virginias and the Kentuckys, and we haven't played well together for a long time.
Good. I'm going to pause you here, Trent, for a moment, because we have limited time, and I want to come back to redistricting here for a moment.
Thank you. Thank you for the environmental question, Susan.
Yes. Thank you, Susan. Let's see. David, would you catch us up if anything is missing, or a comment to make, or a question for Trent from the chat? And you have to,
Yeah, I don't know if I saw any questions per se. There was some discussion about HB6 and how it's around because of, in many reasons, still here because of gerrymandering, and even harder to get rid of because of gerrymandering. Any thoughts, Trent?
Yeah, I mean, HB6 is a lot of things, but it is at its core a gerrymandering issue. It is why it's not just a big moneyed interests against the opposition of people. That happens all the time. First Energy actually tried to get this $1 billion bailout for years through other processes, through the Public Utilities Commission, through the feds. But it wasn't until they figured out, hey, why don't we use these gerrymandered districts and folks like Householder to help get us this through. And that's why you realize that when it should have been a huge part of the 2020 election for the state legislature, it was not. And actually, two incumbents that lost their job voted against HB6 and were staunch opponents of that bill. They ended up being the few that lost their job, 1R, 1D. And it's sort of the poster child of how how gerrymandering shows itself, even when there's, well, what is now at least 2 folks have pled guilty to criminal activity in getting that bill passed.
Yeah, right. Yes. Thanks, David, for catching up with those. We have just a few more minutes left, who would have a question or comment for Trent as we prepare ourselves for this year? Chuck.
Yeah, you had said the last thing you would have to do is go back to the ballot box. I was hoping you were talking about maybe saying maybe we need a independent commission. Paul alluded to the fact that Arizona has one that's doing very well. I'm really curious how you come up with an independent, nonpartisan commission.
How you come up with an independent, nonpartisan? That's a great question. That's why it didn't. Why issue 1 didn't have it. It was something that's, yes, it's worked, but I think Ohio, if people know Ohio, we're not the first in things, and we're usually about the 26th in passing good ideas. I think that, you know, the details of what a return to the ballot will look like and whether that would be an independent commission are TBD, even TBD to TBD to me, and TBD to a lot of folks that are in the coalition as to what that may look like. The key there is just that we want to make it clear to ourselves, to everyone, and to the legislature also, that there is still that option to go to the legislature, and we will continue as we're going to walk and chew gum and do something else at the same time, including figuring out, to your point, what is the next best thing that we can do if this one is going to fall apart or does fall apart in terms of what we think fairness is. And maybe it is an independent commission, and there's going to be folks again. I will be the modest, self-deprecating guy I've been for a while. I know that's not me that's going to be the smart one to figure it out, but somebody that I know and can point to, maybe someday we'll make sure that we figure out what that commission looks like, what that process looks like that actually will get us fairness. But
yeah,
we're going to keep hope in public input and public accountability to see how, the first, second, and maybe third prongs of that approach before we get to the ballot get to.
Yeah, good. Who's next? Yes, Brewster.
Trent, have you thought about, or has the coalition thought about hosting in each of the major media markets, the major urban areas, a major forum where you would invite all the members of the delegation from the House and the Senate from the region to attend to hear testimony from people? In other words, you guys going out there with the league, Common Cause, et cetera, sponsoring that forum, and frankly, making it awkward and difficult for legislators not to show up?
Yeah, the public hearing, the citizen hearing, citizen-led public hearing is an option that we have out there, and probably with or without a good true public process that the legislature puts through, that will be, I think, part of the first part of 2021 is, and we did that with repeal of HB 6. When the public wasn't invited to testify on a repeal bill, we just said, well, we're going to have our own. And again, another silver lining of the Zoom meeting era, we could get tons of folks to come to the same hearing and have that and divide it up into different regions of the state, and invite those legislators to come and listen to the public. And yeah, that is something that we have on. It's discussed in the agenda, and hopefully as we complete that agenda for the plan in the next few months, or excuse me, next few weeks, that you'll see that in the next few months.
Yeah, terrific. Yes, we have a few minutes left, so another one more or maybe two at the most. Who's next?
I'll go, Richard.
Thank you.
This is a quick, it's more of an observation. I mean, we've been talking about redistricting and maps and fairness. I thought I remembered that fairness, that language in particular, was left out of the legislation in particular. And I thought it was because, well, as I think about it, it's because there is no motivation for our legislators to be fair. Is it correct that that's the language we're using, but I don't think it's written in the legislation?
The term fairness isn't there. That's why it's incumbent upon folks to make sure that is part of the discussion that's made. That is at its core what a redistricting process is to do. That's why you have it in this, especially in the congressional level, why you don't just leave it to the bill process that has been the process for years. Yeah, I mean, that was taking that language out. It was part of what was originally offered. I think that with or without it being in there, the push is still there as to what fairness means to folks. Because that was another argument that was had, that, well, you can't define fairness. I believe you can, but there are some that say, well, legally you can't, how can you define fairness? Because fairness is different with folks. They thought the 2010, they said that the 2010 maps were fair.
Yeah, right.
That's obviously not true.
Yeah.
So I think it's incumbent upon everybody who cares about it and cares about really what they feel fairness is. And this goes to the same question earlier about what community means.
Yeah.
Making it part of the discussion with your legislators, discussion with your neighbors, discussion with anybody you see, that this is what it means to be fair. And to me, it's making sure that you're, to your point, Michael, Michelle, sorry, just sort of my eye there in the chat. Yeah, fairness is subjective, so that's what makes it difficult in terms of it's that legal gray area that lawyers love to talk about, but it's hard to get a decision made. But it's something you can put into this as a value that you believe is part of this. So whether it's in the legislative language or not, it's the value that we are saying is part of this. And
a lawyer told me,
needs to be part of that discussion.
A lawyer told me, Trent, that it's going to be easy to go into court because the criteria are there. Are the districts compact? Are they, do they have a shape rather than cracked and all over the place? And are they avoiding being overtly partisan? That there has, there can be nothing overt. If they're going to be partisan, it has to be extremely subtle rather than overt. So this lawyer said, winning the cases in court, in the Supreme Court in Ohio, if that's the path it might go to sometime, she thought that there was a good chance to have these maps that would not have those two criteria dismissed. What's your reading of that? You know the law better than me.
That's my reading too, is that there's not a lot of wiggle room because you don't have a subjective term like fairness in there. There was some language that was originally presented that was like, it was very squishy, and it was good for not attorneys like me who get paid a nonprofit salary, but attorneys that get paid by the hour, much more by the hour than I ever will, that they can talk about, what their definition is. So you're right. And I agree with that sentiment that, when you actually have, cannot be compact, cannot crack more than this many times, this county or this city. It will make it easier, yes, to get in, and easier to I think, have a viable challenge. But it's the Ohio Supreme Court. I have maybe a little bit more confidence in them than I do the Ohio General Assembly, but that's not much of a bar, not a high bar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Trent, for coming and sharing with us and for introducing us to, for me, I heard of the Ohio Environmental Council, but I didn't have a direct contact. So thank you, Brewster, for introducing Trent to us and to have a partner to be able to partner through the year on this redistricting and other things as well. Like Susan asked the environmental questions. We have an indivisible group that works hard in the environmental things. So we're going to really think of you as a resource there too. So it's been great being with you. We'll make this recording available if you wish to share it with people in your groups or networks, or to listen to it yourself, share it with friends. And in closing, my point is, if we work together on this issue of redistricting and how that leads to better laws and policies and all, and we work on environment, knowing our planet, that's maybe the most crucial of all, that working together, we get better and better at this, we're really going to create a positive difference. It's going to shift the whole playing field as we get better and better at this. And I hope this session, I know this session tonight, working with you, Trent, is a good example of that, of getting better and better at working together. So thank you everyone for coming, and let's stay in touch. Please stay involved in all the ways that are good for you. Good night.
All right.
Thank you all.